Um, in composition, I mean, there are many ways. There are many methods to composing, and for me now there are many ways in which I might begin a composition. But initially, I'd say when I started composing, and probably for the first 5 or 10 years that I was doing it, and composing is something that I came to much later in my musical life. I mean, honestly, I didn't really write a tune until shortly before I recorded my first album. I realized that I had to write some music for my first album, so that's when I wrote my first tunes. Initially, for me, composition came from improvisation, in the sense that I couldn't just sit down and write, you know? I had to sit down and play, you know, whether it was playing the saxophone or oftentimes playing the piano. And from just playing around, you know, from improvising, ideas might come, and I couldn't force those ideas, but some sort of little seed, some sort of cell that felt inspiring. Maybe not to anybody else, but to me, you know, something that I thought it could be a melody, it could be a groove, it could be a bass line. I hope I'm not getting too technical here. Stop me if I am. But some little idea, some little eureka moment that I could say, oh, this is the kernel. This can be the seed for something more. And for me, for a long time, that was something that that really couldn't be planned or forced, and generally to the point that oftentimes if I sat down, you know, if I sat down to play, and at the back of my mind I thought, oh, maybe I'll come up with an idea for a composition, you know, it would be futile. You know, oftentimes when I was first composing, the ideas, those initial ideas for compositions, came when I had no agenda, when I was just, you know, just playing, you know, just fiddling around. As time has gone on, and as I've gotten more serious as a composer and talked to more composers, I've learned that, like most serious composers, like most serious writers, the biggest thing is to start writing, to start with something. I mean, I've talked to composers that write some of the most, what to me sounds like some of the most organic, magical, inspired, ethereal music that they'll say, oh, well, you know, they'll tell me the way I started writing this tune was just, you know, writing random notes down on a staff. Or that they might start with a very, very concrete intellectual idea. You know, I'm going to take these 3 notes and figure out how many different ways, you know, I can put them together. But the idea is to start writing, not feeling like you have to have that eureka moment, not feeling like you have to have that great seminal idea. So as time has gone on, I've started to take a little bit more of that approach. But still, there is always, for me, when I'm writing, a tremendous amount of improvisation. You know, whether an idea starts as this kind of dreamlike thing, you know, or something that I pull from the unconscious, or whether it starts as a very, concrete intellectual idea, or whether it starts as, some sort of test I make for myself. However it starts, there's a lot of, the process for me is an improvisational process. I have an idea, I play with that idea. I play with that idea on the saxophone, I play with the idea on the piano. A lot of times now I write directly into the computer. I use notation software, but so I can play with the idea on the staff, on the computer. But there's a tremendous amount of play, there's a tremendous amount of improvisation involved. The big difference is that when I'm improvising as a jazz musician, when I'm taking a solo, what I play is what I play. There's no going back, there's no editing.
You do your recordings in one shot.
Well, yeah, I answered the first part of your question. So now, improvisation in the studio. I mean, that is, there's something inherently wrong about recording jazz in the studio. I mean, there's not morally wrong, but somehow like conceptually there's wrong. I mean, this is an art form that celebrates and that exalts spontaneity, and where it's all about the moment and being there for that moment. And the moment is there, and you play, and then the moment is gone. But the thing is, when you're recording, that moment lives forever, right? So I don't ever think, I feel like it's an illusion, it's a delusion to think that you can capture in the studio what the experience of the moment, the improvisational moment, the way it is in a live performance, because it's not a live performance. It's not. It's a completely different environment. There is no audience. The audience is the microphones. They're not it's not a very, it's not a very giving audience. So I don't try to recreate the live experience in the studio, but I try to use the studio to capture as best I can the spontaneity of the music, and then refine it as best we can without losing that spontaneity. So to answer your question, yes, basically everything is done in one take. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like. You play your song, people take their solo, I'm simplifying it, but you take your solos, you play the song, you do everything through, then you've got a take of that tune. Maybe you'll do another take of that tune. Maybe if you're obsessive, you'll do another 20 takes of that tune. But you're playing them, you're playing it from beginning to end the way you would in a live performance. But then you have the option of, well, first you have to go and select the take or takes that you think are the best, and then you also have the option of being able to edit. And so, say you like the saxophone solo from one take and the piano solo from another take, you might decide to cobble them together. Now, for most jazz musicians now, that would be something that they wouldn't think twice about. There are some purists who, who believe that everything should be a complete take from beginning to end. So there's different, everyone has their own attitude towards that. But I think most jazz musicians are going to use the capabilities of the studio to try to refine it. And you can also fix, say you messed up the melody, or someone made a mistake, you can go back and try to fix that in the studio. But what I found is that there's a limit to how much you can tamper. And the limit, it's not, there's really no technical limit at this time, but there's a musical limit, there's a limit, and you reach that limit pretty fast. There's a limit at, you start making the music worse. It's not about the ideology of, oh, well, you can't touch this because this is, live spontaneous jazz and you're somehow sullying it or making it impure by correcting this. But you're actually, you start messing with it too much and trying to fix too many things, and you're stripping the life out of the music. You're stripping it just doesn't, it doesn't feel right anymore. And I believe that that's not only something, I believe that's something that even somebody who's not, really familiar with jazz would be able to sense. Like if I selected, an unedited take of a tune from the studio, and then I selected a over-edited take, and played them for a lay listener, I think that most listeners would be able to sense something that's something more, there's just more life to the one that's been